The day I chose Alice was the day my mother stopped calling me her daughter. I didn't expect it to happen quite like that, in the middle of our family's marble-floored foyer, with the crystal chandelier casting judgmental shadows across her face. My name is Sierra, and until that moment, I'd been the perfect Blair daughter. Ivy League educated, successful in the family business, and, according to my mother, just one good marriage away from completing the picture-perfect life she'd planned for me. "You can't be serious," my mother said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Adoption? Have you lost your mind?" I stood my ground, though my hands were trembling. "I've met her, Mom. Alice is incredible. She's brilliant, kind, and—" "She's not blood," my father interrupted, emerging from his study. His presence filled the room like a storm cloud. "The Blair name means something, Sierra. We don't just take in strays." The word strays hit me like a physical blow. I'd seen Alice's file 3 months ago, a 12-year-old girl who'd lost her parents in a car accident. The moment I met her, something clicked. She had this way of looking at the world that made everything seem possible. "Dad, if you'd just meet her." "This discussion is over," he said, turning back toward his study. "Either come to your senses or—" "Or what?" I challenged, my voice stronger than I felt. "You'll cut me off? Disinherit me? Go ahead." My mother gasped. My sister Natalie, who'd been hovering in the doorway, stepped forward. "Sierra, please, think about what you're doing." "I have thought about it. For months. Alice needs a family and I—" "We are your family!" My mother's voice cracked. "Everything we've built, everything we've worked for. You'd throw it all away for some— Some what, Mom? Some orphan?" I pulled out my phone and showed them Alice's picture. "Look at her. Really look at her." But they wouldn't. My mother turned away and my father's study door slammed shut. Natalie reached for my arm. "Give them time. Maybe if you wait—" "I can't wait. The adoption hearing is next week." I took a deep breath. "I'm not asking for permission. I'm telling you I'm becoming a mother." "Then you're no daughter of mine." My mother's words fell like ice. "Get out." I'd prepared myself for resistance, but this felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed. "Mom, out!" I walked to the door, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Each step echoed with finality. At the threshold, I turned back one last time. "You know what's funny? Alice asked me yesterday what her new grandparents would be like. She was so excited to meet you." My mother's face twitched, but she held her ground. Natalie looked between us, tears in her eyes. "Nat," I said softly, "you're welcome to meet your niece any time." The drive home was a blur. I pulled into my driveway and sat there, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. My phone buzzed, a text from the adoption agency confirming tomorrow's pre-placement visit. I opened my gallery and found the video from last week. Alice sat cross-legged on the floor of the group home, explaining her science project to me. Her eyes lit up as she described how she'd built a small wind turbine from recycled materials. "And see, Sierra," she'd said, pointing to the tiny blades spinning in front of a fan. "It actually works. Do you think when I come home we could build a bigger one?" "When I come home. Not if. When." I wiped my eyes and typed a quick response to the agency. "Looking forward to tomorrow's visit. Everything's ready." Because it was. The guest room had been transformed into a space for a 12-year-old girl who loved science and art. The walls were painted her favourite shade of blue, and a desk by the window waited for her projects. On the bookshelf, engineering books sat next to Harry Potter. My phone buzzed again. "Natalie, they'll come around. They have to. But Sierra, are you sure about this?" I thought about Alice's smile, about the way she'd hugged me goodbye last week, about how she'd whispered, "See you soon, Mom," when she thought I couldn't hear. "More sure than I've ever been about anything," I texted back. Tomorrow I'd sign the papers that would make me Alice's mother. My parents might have written me out of their story, but Alice and I? We were about to write our own. And somehow, watching the last rays of sunlight fade from the sky, I knew that would be enough. More than enough. It would be everything. Mom, I think I solved it. Alice burst into my home office, waving a notebook filled with calculations. 3 years had passed since the adoption, and my 15-year-old daughter had grown into a force of nature. I pushed away from my laptop, grateful for the interruption from quarterly reports. Solved what, sweetie? The solar panel efficiency problem I've been working on. Look! She spread her notes across my desk, pointing excitedly at diagrams. If we adjust the angle and add this coating I developed. The doorbell interrupted her explanation. Through the window, I spotted Natalie's car in the driveway. Alice's face fell slightly. Is that Aunt Natalie again? Why don't you head upstairs and finish your homework? I'll handle this. She gathered her notes, hesitating at the door. Tell her I said hi. I guess. These surprise visits from Natalie had become more frequent lately. I opened the front door to find my sister clutching her designer purse like a shield. Mom's sick, she blurted out before I could speak. My heart skipped. How sick? Nothing serious, just the flu. But she's been asking about Alice. Natalie stepped inside, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She saw the article about Alice winning the state science fair. They have Google Alerts set up for us now. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Sierra, please. They're trying in their way. Natalie sank onto the couch. Dad's business is struggling. The market's changing and well, you know how he is about change. I did know. The man who refused to modernize his email system was probably having a hell of a time adapting to current market demands. What do they want, Nat? Because if they're expecting me to come crawling back... No, nothing like that. Just maybe bring Alice to Sunday dinner? Let them meet her properly? I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. After 3 years of pretending she doesn't exist, after missing every birthday, every achievement, people can change, Natalie insisted. Quinton's been talking to Dad, trying to... Mom, is everything okay? Alice stood at the top of the stairs, concern etched on her face. Natalie turned, and I saw her eyes widen. The gangly 12-year-old in the adoption photos had grown into a poised teenager with bright eyes and her father's old lab coat that I'd gotten her for Christmas. Alice, Wow, you've grown so much. That tends to happen in 3 years, Alice replied coolly, descending the stairs. I heard you mention Sunday dinner. Don't worry about us, we have plans. We do, I asked. Yeah, remember, Lane's coming over to help me with the prototype. And you promised to make your famous lasagna. I hadn't promised any such thing, but I played along. Right, of course. Natalie's face fell. Another time, maybe. Alice reached the bottom of the stairs and stood beside me. You know what's funny? I used to dream about having grandparents who'd be proud of me. Now, I'm kind of glad they stayed away. Because Mom, she squeezed my hand. She's been enough. More than enough. Natalie's eyes filled with tears. Alice, they made mistakes, but... Mistakes? Alice's voice sharpened. Is that what we're calling it? They threw their daughter out for choosing to love someone who needed love. That's not a mistake, that's a choice. Alice, I whispered, squeezing her hand back. No, Mom, they need to hear this. She turned back to Natalie. Tell them I'm not interested in their guilt or their late attempts at connection. Tell them I'm too busy revolutionizing solar energy efficiency and making my mom proud. Natalie stood, clutching her purse tighter. I'll tell them you're both doing well. After she left, I pulled Alice into a hug. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. She pulled back, her eyes fierce. Nobody gets to hurt you anymore, not even them. Especially not them. When did you get so protective? Learned from the best. She grinned suddenly. But you do actually have to make lasagna now. Lane really is coming over to help with the prototype. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Deal. But first, show me these calculations you were excited about. As Alice launched into her explanation, my phone buzzed with a text from Natalie. Dad's company lost another major contract. He's desperate but won't admit it. Please think about Sunday dinner. I turned my phone face down and focused on my daughter's animated description of solar panel coefficients. Let them worry about their precious family business. Alice and I had built something far more valuable. a family based on choice, not obligation. But as I watched her sketch diagrams in the air, a small part of me wondered if karma wasn't already setting its wheels in motion. After all, the brilliant young scientist they'd rejected might just hold the key to saving everything they held dear. "They're filing for bankruptcy protection," Quinton said over coffee. My brother-in-law had suggested meeting at a quiet cafe across town, away from prying eyes. "Your father's too proud to admit it publicly, but the company's bleeding money." I stirred my latte, watching the foam swirl. "How bad?" "Bad enough that they're selling the summer house, the one in Martha's Vineyard." That hit hard. I'd spent every summer there until the estrangement. Dad would rather sell his kidney than that house. "Times change," Quinton leaned forward. "Look, I know you don't owe them anything, but you understand modern business better than anyone in the family. If you could just—" "Mom," Alice's voice cut through the cafe's quiet buzz. She stood at our table, still in her lab coat from her university internship, Lane hovering uncertainly behind her. "Uncle Quinton." "Alice," Quinton stood, smiling warmly. "I haven't seen you since—" "Since never," she finished coldly. "Because you never visited either." Lane stepped forward, placing a protective hand on Alice's shoulder. "We can come back later." "No, stay." I gestured to the empty chairs. Quinton was just leaving. "Actually," Alice said, sliding into a seat, "maybe he should hear this." She pulled out her tablet. "Lane and I just came from the lab. We've perfected the solar coating." My heart skipped. She'd been working on this project for months, refusing to show anyone but Lane and me until it was ready. "The what?" Quinton asked. "A nanotech coating that increases solar panel efficiency by 40%, Lane explained, his eyes bright with excitement. "It's revolutionary." Alice pulled up graphs and charts. "We've run all the tests. It works. And the manufacturing cost is minimal compared to the energy output increase." I watched Quinton's face as understanding dawned. This could save millions in energy costs for large-scale operations. Like, say, a manufacturing company struggling to keep up with rising energy costs. Alice's smile was sharp. "One that still uses outdated power systems in all its facilities." Quinton stared at her. "You know about the company's problems." "I know everything." Alice swiped through more documents. "I've been monitoring the situation. Did you really think Mum wouldn't keep tabs on her father's life's work?" I reached for her hand under the table, squeezing gently. "Alice, we're presenting this at the Clean Energy Summit next month," she continued. "Every major company in the industry will be there, including your biggest competitors." Quinton's coffee sat forgotten. "Alice, if you're suggesting what I think—" "I'm not suggesting anything." She stood, gathering her things. "I'm just letting you know that solutions exist. Whether pride allows certain people to see them, well, that's not my problem." Lane helped her with her coat, trying to hide a smile. "We should head back to the lab, Alice. The final testing sequence." "Right," she kissed my cheek. "Don't work too late, Mom. Movie night, remember?" After they left, Quinton let out a long breath. "She's brilliant." "Yes, she is." "And she did this for you, to prove them wrong." I shook my head. "No, she did this because she's passionate about sustainable energy. The fact that it might help the family business, that's just karma. They should know about this. Then tell them." I stood, gathering my purse. "Tell them their granddaughter, the one they rejected, might hold the key to saving everything. Tell them she did it without their name, their money, or their approval." "Sierra, movie night with my daughter, remember?" I headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and Quinton, the summer house? Tell them not to sell it yet. Something tells me they might need liquid assets for technology upgrades soon." That evening, curled up on the couch with Alice watching her favourite sci-fi movie, I finally asked the question that had been burning in my mind. "How long have you been working on this specifically for the company?" She paused the movie, turning to face me. "Since Aunt Natalie's visit 3 months ago, Lane helped me research their energy consumption patterns. Did you know they spend 4 times the industry average on power? Your grandfather isn't big on efficiency, Well, he's going to have to be. Her expression softened. I didn't do it for them, Mom. I did it because it's good technology that could help a lot of companies. But if they want it, they'll have to come to you. Exactly. She grinned suddenly. Want to be my +1 at the summit presentation? Wouldn't miss it for the world. I pulled her close, remembering the 12-year-old who built tiny wind turbines. You know I'm proud of you, right? Not because of this, but because of who you are. I know, Mom. She unpaused the movie. Now shush. This is the best part. But as the sci-fi drama unfolded on screen, I couldn't help thinking about another drama about to unfold. One where pride would face off against necessity, and where karma might finally come full circle. The family estate looked exactly the same, right down to the pretentious lion door knockers. I hadn't planned to return here, but Natalie's frantic call had left little choice. Family emergency meeting, she'd said. Dad's making some kind of announcement. Alice squeezed my hand as we stood at the door. Ready? Are you? Born ready. She smoothed her blazer, professional, polished, nothing like the rejected orphan they probably imagined. Besides, Lane's on standby if we need a quick escape. The door opened before we could knock. Natalie stood there, eyes wide. You came. Both of you. Let's not make it a bigger deal than it is, I said, stepping inside. The foyer still smelled of Mom's favourite potpourri. Family portraits lined the walls, a timeline of our lives, stopping abruptly 3 years ago. Alice studied them with clinical interest. Interesting gap in the family history, she murmured. Voices drifted from the living room. I recognized Dad's agitated tone, Mom's attempts to soothe him, and other voices. Board members, probably. Sierra. Mom stood in the doorway, looking older than I remembered. Her eyes fixed on Alice. And Alice. Mrs. Blair, Alice replied coolly. Lovely home. The chandelier's gorgeous. Austrian crystal, right? Though the energy consumption must be astronomical. Mom flinched. Please come in. Your father's about to start. The living room fell silent as we entered. Dad stood by the fireplace, his usual power position, but something was off. His shoulders sagged, his hair greyer than ever. Sierra. He nodded stiffly. I wasn't sure you'd come. Natalie said it was important. It is. He cleared his throat, addressing the room. As you know, we've faced some challenges lately. Market changes, rising costs. Just say it, Kingsley, one board member interrupted. We're sinking. We're not sinking, Dad snapped. We're adapting, which is why I've called this meeting. I'm announcing my retirement. Gasps filled the room. Mum grabbed the nearest chair for support. The board will begin searching for a new CEO immediately, Dad continued. Someone who understands modern markets, someone who can... Actually, Alice's voice cut through the shock like a laser. I have a better idea. All eyes turned to her. She stood, pulling out her tablet with the same confidence she showed in the lab. Alice, I warned softly. Trust me, Mom. She connected her tablet to the room's projector. Mr. Blair, grandfather if you prefer, though you haven't earned that title, your company's main problem isn't leadership. It's inefficiency. Graphs appeared on the screen. Energy consumption rates, cost analyses, projection models. Your facilities use outdated systems that bleed money, but there's a solution. She pulled up her research. A proprietary nanotech coating that could cut your energy costs by 40%. The board members leaned forward. Dad's face reddened. Who do you think you are? He began. I'm the person who developed this technology, Alice cut in. The same person you rejected because I wasn't blood. Ironic, isn't it? This is preposterous, Dad sputtered. You're just a brilliant scientist, a board member finished. I read about your work in Tech Monthly. That coating, it's revolutionary, Alice smiled. Thank you. We're presenting at the Clean Energy Summit next month. Every major company will be there, including your competitors. The room erupted in urgent whispers. Dad gripped the mantle, knuckles white. What do you want? He asked finally. Want? Alice looked genuinely surprised. I don't want anything. I'm simply presenting options. You can either swallow your pride and work with me, or watch your life's work crumble because you couldn't see past your own prejudices. Mom stepped forward. Alice, please, we made mistakes. Mistakes? I stood beside my daughter. You threw us away, and now you want her help? The company's not just about us, Natalie interjected. Hundreds of employees depend on it. Alice's expression softened slightly. I know. That's why I'm here. But understand this. If we do this, we do it my way. No compromises, no conditions. Dad opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded once. Good. Alice gathered her things. Have your lawyers contact Mum's office to set up a meeting. We'll discuss terms then. As we turned to leave, she paused at the door. Oh, and grandmother, that chandelier. Switch to LED bulbs. Small changes make big differences. In the car, I finally found my voice. That was satisfying? She grinned. Just wait until they read my terms. Lane helped me draft them. They're going to love the environmental compliance clauses. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Mum, they hurt you. Hurt us. But instead of revenge, I'm offering salvation. She pulled out her phone to text Lane. Sometimes, the best revenge is forcing people to face their own failures, and then helping them fix them. I started the car, glancing one last time at the house. Through the window, I could see them all still standing there, shocked into silence by the hurricane that was my daughter. Ready to go home? I asked. Actually, she smiled. I think we just started something much bigger than going home. The conference room felt like a pressure cooker. On one side sat my father, mother, and 3 board members. On our side, Alice, Lane, our lawyer, and me. The contract lay between us like a loaded weapon. This is absurd, Dad exploded, throwing down his reading glasses. 51% control of environmental initiatives, mandatory board positions for both of you, complete restructuring of our energy systems within 18 months. Those are my terms, Alice replied calmly. The technology alone will save you millions annually. The restructuring will position you as an industry leader in sustainable manufacturing. We've operated the same way for 40 years, and that's exactly why you're failing. Alice pulled up projections on the wall screen. Your energy costs are crippling you. Your competitors are going green while you're burning money on outdated systems. Lane stepped in, his voice steady. We've run the numbers extensively. Even with implementation costs, you'll see return on investment within 2 years. Return on investment? Mom's voice quavered. This isn't just about money. This is our family legacy. Family? I couldn't help but laugh. Now you care about family? Sierra, our lawyer warned softly. No, let's talk about family, Alice said, standing. 3 years ago, you threw away your daughter because she chose to love someone who needed love. Now you're facing bankruptcy and suddenly family matters. The room fell silent. Even Dad couldn't meet her eyes. Here's what's going to happen, Alice continued. You'll sign this contract. I'll save your company. But understand this. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for the hundreds of employees who depend on their paychecks, for the environment. And yes, for my mother, who still checks your company's stock prices every morning because despite everything, she cares about her father's life's work. I felt tears prick my eyes. Dad looked at me sharply. You still follow the company? Every day, I admitted. Just because you stopped being my father doesn't mean I stopped being your daughter. Mum made a small, broken sound. The coating technology is just the beginning, Alice pressed on. I have plans for complete modernization, solar integration, waste reduction systems, but it happens on my terms. Or what? One board member asked. Or I take it to your competitors. They're already interested. She smiled. Very interested. Dad stood abruptly, pacing to the window. You're blackmailing us. No, I'm offering you salvation. The choice to take it is yours. Lane pulled out another document. We've also drafted a press release announcing the partnership. The market would respond very favourably to a family reconciliation story combined with green innovation. You've thought of everything, Dad said quietly. I learned from you, actually. Alice's voice softened slightly. You always said business is about leverage. Well, here we are. The board members huddled together, whispering urgently. Mom kept looking between Dad and me, her perfectly manicured hands twisting in her lap. Finally, Dad turned from the window. If, and I mean if, we agree to this, what guarantees do we have that you won't just take control and destroy everything? Because unlike you, Alice replied, I understand that family isn't about blood, it's about choice. And I'm choosing to help, despite everything. The question is, are you choosing to let me? The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Then Dad did something I'd never seen before. He sat down heavily, looking suddenly old. Where do I sign? Dad! Natalie burst out from the doorway where she'd been listening. You can't be serious. We don't have a choice, he said quietly. And maybe it's time we admitted that. Alice pushed the contract forward. As Dad reached for a pen, she added, one more thing. Mom gets her old office back, the corner one with the view. I stared at her. I hadn't asked for that. And Sunday dinners, she continued. Not every week, but sometimes, if Mom wants, because this only works if we actually try to be a family. Mom started crying openly now. Dad's hand shook as he signed. Welcome to the future of Blair Industries, Alice said, but her voice was gentle now. Let's build something better, together. As we gathered our things to leave, Mom caught my arm. Sierra, would you like to have lunch sometime? Just us? I looked at Alice, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Okay, I said. But not at the club. There's this little cafe near my office. Anywhere, Mom whispered. Anywhere you want. Outside, Lane hugged Alice tightly. You were amazing in there. Thanks for having my back. She turned to me. Mom, you okay? I pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo mixed with lab chemicals. You didn't have to add that part about Sunday dinners. Yes, I did. She pulled back, eyes bright. Because sometimes fixing things means more than just business plans and contracts. Sometimes it means giving people a chance to be better than they were. Looking back at the building, I wondered if she was right. If maybe, just maybe, karma wasn't about punishment after all. Maybe it was about giving people the opportunity to face their mistakes and choose a different path. They're sabotaging us, Lane burst into my office, waving his tablet. The old guard in production is deliberately slowing down implementation. I looked up from my computer, where I'd been reviewing the first phase of Alice's modernization plan. What do you mean? They're losing equipment orders, scheduling installation crews for the wrong dates, claiming system incompatibilities that don't exist. He pulled up a spreadsheet. We're 3 weeks behind schedule. Dad's people, I muttered. Of course they're resistant. My office door opened again, and Alice stormed in, her lab coat fluttering. Did you see the memo? They're trying to modify my coating formula without consulting me. What? I grabbed my phone to call Dad, but it already showed 3 missed calls from Natalie. Sierra, she said when I called back. It's bad. Dad's old VP of operations is rallying people against the changes. They're saying Alice is too young, too inexperienced. Too much of an outsider, I finished bitterly. You need to come to the main facility. Now. The factory floor was chaos when we arrived. Workers clustered in groups, arguing loudly. The installation team sat idle beside crates of new solar panels, while Dad's VP, Richard, held court near the control room. These changes will cost jobs, he was saying. This girl thinks she can waltz in and... This girl is saving your jobs, Lane shouted, pushing forward. Alice grabbed my arm. Mom, look at the control panel. I followed her gaze. The main power systems were running at dangerous levels, well above normal parameters. They're overloading the old system to prove it's more reliable, she whispered. But they've miscalculated. If those readings are accurate... A loud pop echoed through the facility, followed by cascading sparks from the main electrical panel. Emergency lights flashed as the backup system engaged. Everyone out, I shouted. Emergency shutdown. Workers scattered as smoke began pouring from the control room. Alice sprinted toward it, Lane close behind. Alice, no! I tried to grab her, but she was already punching numbers into the backup terminal. The main system's going to blow if we don't redirect power now. Her fingers flew over the keyboard. Lane, cut power to sectors 3 through 7. On it! I grabbed a fire extinguisher as more sparks flew. Through the chaos, I saw Dad and Mum rushing in, faces pale. What happened? Dad demanded. Your people happened, I shot back. They overloaded the system trying to prove Alice wrong. Another explosion rocked the facility. Alice's voice cut through the noise. Got it! Lane, now! The emergency lights flickered, then stabilized. The smoking control panel went dark as backup systems fully engaged. In the sudden quiet, Alice's voice carried clearly. That's what happens when you let pride override science. She turned to face the gathered workers. The old system just failed catastrophically. If we hadn't installed the backup system last week, against significant resistance, I might add, this whole facility would be dark right now. Richard stepped forward. Now see here. No, you see. Alice cut him off. I just saved this facility from a complete meltdown. Your little demonstration of reliability nearly caused millions in damage. Still want to question my competence? Dad pushed through the crowd. Richard, in my office. Now, he turned to Alice. How long until we can restore power? The new system can be online in an hour. The old one? She gestured at the smoking panel. That's dead. Permanently. Guess you'll have to use my inexperienced solution after all. Workers began drifting back to their stations, many nodding respectfully to Alice. Lane started directing the installation team to begin work on the remaining sectors. Mum touched my arm. She really does know what she's doing, doesn't she? She always has. I watched Alice confidently giving instructions to the maintenance crew. Maybe now they'll actually listen to her. Sierra, Dad called from across the floor, I need your help with the incident report. And Alice's, of course. It wasn't quite an apology, but his face showed something I'd rarely seen before. Respect. Alice joined us, still slightly smoky from the control room. Well, congratulations. You just got your modernization ahead of schedule. Sometimes the universe has a way of forcing change. The universe or a certain teenage genius? I smiled. Speaking of which, she checked her phone. The press will be here in 20 minutes. Something about a heroic young innovator saves family company. Lane's already handling it. Dad's eyes widened. The press? Welcome to modern business management, Alice said sweetly. Now, should we discuss expediting the remaining upgrades? Unless you'd prefer more electrical fires. As we walked toward Dad's office, I caught Alice's small smile. She'd known all along that something like this might happen, and she'd been prepared, turning their resistance into a public relations triumph. My daughter hadn't just inherited my determination, she'd improved upon it. And watching Dad's face as she outlined her accelerated implementation plan, I knew the last pieces of resistance were finally crumbling. Stock's up 70% since the modernization, Lane announced, bursting into the conference room where we were preparing for the company's centennial celebration. The press is calling us the Green Manufacturing Revolution. Alice barely looked up from her tablet. Did they mention the employee wellness programs too? Front page of the Business Journal, he confirmed, dropping a newspaper on the table. Along with a very flattering photo of you and Sierra at the factory reopening. 6 months had transformed the company. The old manufacturing floor now gleamed with solar panels and state-of-the-art equipment. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high, and our carbon footprint had dropped dramatically. Your father wants to see you both, Mum said, entering with an armful of decorations. In his office, he says it's important. Alice and I exchanged glances. Despite the success, these meetings still carried the weight of years of tension. Dad stood at his office window holding something in his hands. Close the door, please. If this is about the new environmental compliance standards, Alice started, the data clearly shows... It's not about that. He turned, and I was surprised to see his eyes were wet. This is about family. He placed a wooden box on his desk. I recognized it immediately, the family heirloom box passed down through generations of Blairs. Dad, I was wrong, he said simply. About everything. About what makes a family strong. About what makes a business successful. About you, Sierra. And especially about you, Alice. Alice stepped forward cautiously. Mr. Blair, grandfather, he corrected softly. Please, if you'll allow it. He opened the box, revealing the antique compass that had guided our family's first business venture a century ago. This was supposed to go to my firstborn son, he continued, then to my firstborn daughter. But I let pride and tradition blind me to what was right in front of me, the most brilliant mind this family has ever produced. He lifted the compass and held it out to Alice. This belongs to you now. You've shown us all true north when we were lost. Alice's hands trembled as she took it. I don't know what to say. Say you'll stay, Mom blurted out. Both of you. Not just for business, but for Sunday dinners and holidays and everything we missed. There's more, Dad added, pulling out papers. I'm restructuring the company leadership. Sierra, you'll be CEO. Alice, Chief Innovation Officer with a seat on the board. If you want it. I felt tears threatening. Dad, let me finish. He took a deep breath. And I want to announce it at tonight's celebration, in front of everyone. Let them all see that this company's future isn't about blood, it's about vision. Your vision, Alice. Alice studied the compass, then looked up with that determined expression I knew so well. On one condition. Name it. The summer house? The one you almost sold? Turn it into a science camp for foster kids. Give other children the chances I got. Mom gasped softly. Dad's face worked with emotion. Already done, he said. The paperwork was filed last week. We're calling it the Alice Wilson Science Academy for Young Innovators. Alice launched herself into his arms, surprising everyone, especially Dad. After a moment's shock, he hugged her back fiercely. I'm so sorry, he whispered. So very sorry. Group hug, Lane called from the doorway, where he'd been not so subtly eavesdropping. Mom laughed through her tears and joined us. Later, as workers set up for the celebration, Alice and I stood on the factory floor, watching the sunset stream through the solar panels she'd designed. You planned this all along, didn't you? I asked. From the moment you saw the company was in trouble? She smiled, turning the compass over in her hands. Not all of it. The science camp was a surprise, but the rest? Let's just say I learned from the best about playing the long game. From me. From all of you. Grandfather's strategic thinking, grandmother's attention to detail, your determination. She paused. But mostly from you, Mom. You taught me that sometimes the greatest revenge is showing people a better way, and then helping them take it. The celebration hall was filling up. Through the windows we could see Dad practicing his speech, Mom fussing with his tie. Ready to be officially announced as the future of the family business? I asked. Alice tucked the compass into her pocket and straightened her blazer. Actually, I think we already are the present. The future is what we make next. And what's that? She grinned, that brilliant, unstoppable grin that had first captured my heart in a group home years ago. Well, Lane and I have been working on this new renewable energy concept as we walk toward our family, our whole, healing, imperfect family. I realized Alice was right. The best revenge wasn't about destroying the old, but about building something new and better from its foundations, and we were just getting started. And now, Dad announced to the packed auditorium at the Alice Wilson Science Academy, I'd like to introduce our first graduating class of young innovators. I watched from the side stage as 20 teenagers, all from foster homes, stood to thunderous applause. Each wore a lab coat with their name embroidered alongside the Academy logo, a compass pointing true north. Alice squeezed my hand. They did it, Mom. Every single one got full scholarships. Of course they did, Lane said, adjusting his camera. They had you as a mentor. The summer house had transformed beautifully into a state-of-the-art campus. Solar panels glinted on every roof, and the old tennis courts were now testing grounds for renewable energy projects. Dad continued his speech, his voice strong despite recent health challenges. When my granddaughter first proposed this academy, I didn't understand. Now watching these brilliant young minds flourish, I realized she saw something I couldn't, that potential knows no bloodlines. Mom dabbed at her eyes in the front row, sitting next to Natalie and Quinton. The family weekly dinners had become a tradition again, but different now, filled with lively debates about innovation and sustainability rather than rigid formality. And speaking of potential, Dad said, I'd like to share some news. Our company's Green Manufacturing Initiative, led by Alice, has just been awarded the Global Innovation Prize. But more importantly, he paused, looking directly at Alice. The patent royalties from her technologies will fund similar academies across the country. This was news to me. I turned to Alice, who was trying not to smile. Surprise, she whispered. Karma works better when it keeps giving. The ceremony concluded with each student presenting their final projects. I watched Alice move among them, offering encouragement and adjustments, every bit the mentor she never had. Ms. Wilson, one student, Maria, approached nervously. I wanted to thank you, not just for the scholarship, but for showing us that family isn't about where you come from. It's about where you choose to go, Alice finished, hugging her, and who you choose to become. Later, as the celebration wound down, we gathered in what used to be the summer house's formal dining room, now a cozy common area. Dad sat in his favourite armchair, the old family photos on the walls now mixed with pictures of academy students and their achievements. I've been thinking, he said, watching Alice help students pack up their projects, about what really makes a legacy. And, I prompted, I spent years worried about preserving the family name, but look at what she's built. Not just a successful business, but a way to lift others up. That's a true legacy. Mom joined us, carrying coffee. Remember when you said we don't take in strays? Dad winced. I was an old fool. Was? Alice teased, joining us. The board meeting last week suggests present tense? Hey now, he chuckled. I only argued against the flying solar drones because they seemed excessive. They're not flying solar drones, they're autonomous atmospheric monitoring platforms. Lane corrected, earning laughs from everyone. Natalie raised her coffee cup. To the next generation of innovators and the woman who showed us all a better way. No, Alice said firmly. To family. The one we're born with and the one we choose to build. As the evening light filtered through the solar windows Alice had designed, I watched my daughter surrounded by her students, my parents beaming with genuine pride, and Lane documenting everything for the Academy's newsletter. The wounds of rejection had healed into something stronger, something that could lift others out of similar pain. Mom, Alice called, Maria wants to show you her improved version of my solar coating. She's increased efficiency another 12%. Impossible, Dad said, but his eyes twinkled. Though I seem to recall saying that about your first design too. I joined them at the demonstration table where Maria's prototype glowed with possibility. Around us, other students gathered, eager to share their innovations, their dreams, their potential. This was Alice's real revenge, not destroying the old guard, but building a new generation that would make the old ways obsolete through sheer brilliance. She had taken rejection and turned it into a revolution of opportunity. Ready to head home? Lane asked as the last students left. Alice looked around the room, at the compass logo on the wall, at her grandfather dozing in his chair, at her grandmother arranging tomorrow's schedule, at me. I am home, she said simply. We all are. And in that moment, watching the sunset paint the Academy in shades of gold, I realized that karma hadn't just come full circle. It had spiraled upward, lifting us all to something higher than we'd ever imagined. The lost little girl I'd chosen to love had become the woman who taught us all how to love better. And that was the greatest revenge of all.